Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another live session. As always, thank you so much for being here. I think I was looking at the total number of live sessions that I've done, and this is 115. So we're getting into some pretty good numbers. As we've been talking about in all these live sessions, it's been relatively slow this year, but I am here to help, and we're going to chat through anything and everything today. I think when we have downtime or slow time today, we're going to talk about whether now is a good time to move into big tech or not. And as these sessions have been a little bit slower in 2023, I'll find the time to fill. Some of the answers will be a little bit longer. So as you're coming into the stream, say hello. Let us know where you're visiting from. Really, really excited as always to just handle any questions and make sure that I'm providing value for you. So let's just chat about a couple things before we dive in. And Kirk, thanks for visiting us from London. Anybody who's been on these live streams before know London is at the top of my list for favorite cities. And even in my time at Google, I tried really hard to transfer to London. The stars did not align, unfortunately. So I want to start off. Let's talk about yesterday's video a little bit. There is this false impression. Is that even the right way to term it? But basically, there's this idea or concept that applying to jobs is a successful way to get a job. But historically, about 10% of people get jobs through applying. So yesterday's video that I did is about more of your informal informational interview, which probably more people actually land jobs starting that way. That could be through a referral. That would be a referral maybe at a smaller company. Referrals at bigger companies have a more rigid process. And then absolutely that could happen through networking. So if you're doing any informal interviews at all, watch that video. There are just some basics to be thinking about. And as we're having conversations, just remember AI could be a big part of that informal conversation. How can you utilize AI to help that company, help in your role, et cetera? Critical things to be thinking about. Okay, before we dive in, I'm just going to do a quick prompt on my services. I'm going to have a discount today, as always. So $200 off the interview mastery course if you use the coupon code MAY, MAY. That will be available till 11:59 Pacific time today. And then that code will expire again. The coupon code is MAY, MAY. I do one-on-one interview and one-on-one negotiation coaching. Look at the coaching as an investment. What is the upfront investment for long-term gain, right? So that's something I constantly want people thinking about. I have a ton of free resources. Obviously, new original videos every other Monday. I go live 10 a.m. Pacific time every single Tuesday, and I'll let the community know if I'm not going to go live in a particular week. I have a free Slack group. We have almost 4,000 members in there, so people are sharing. It's a great community. I have 9 killer free resources at practiceinterviews.com. So obviously, as you know, I love to give a ton away for free. And then obviously, if you're interested in my services, hop on to practiceinterviews.com. We're going to dive in. And so I'm here to answer any and all questions. If you like what we're doing today, smash that like button. If you've never subscribed, consider subscribing. Let's get to it. And again, Kirk, thanks for visiting from London. I know it's already past 6 p.m. there, so happy to have you here. Thanks for being here. Okay, let's dive in. So there's one UXW position that hit Google's careers page last week. I contacted my sourcer, linked her to the position, and included several bullets speaking to my fit for the role. Okay, perfect. I set up a GVC with the sourcer for tomorrow to discuss it, among other things. Other than being friendly and excited, is there anything else I can encourage her to be proactive here? Okay. In the past, I've run into 2 scenarios. Either the role suddenly closes at no fault of mine, or I get the spiel about being niche specific, which suggests HM alignment. Okay. Both situations are equally frustrating, especially being stuck in team match limbo for almost a year. I realize most roles are business critical, but can I push my sourcer for the truth? I just don't want to be stuck checking in every week for a month only to find out that the HM was never interested. Seems odd that after 2 contracting opportunities, you still can't get the upper hand as always, your coaching and support is helpful. Okay, so let's go back to this. So, after two contracting roles, I think it's valuable to have help from the sourcer, but the strategy really should be poking and pushing people who you worked with in the past and seeing if they can help. I know that that can be tough if there's limited positions, but those are the people you really want to rely on, because those are the people who really know you, trust you, and know the quality of your work. So I want you to continue to default back to that. In regards to what to talk about with the sourcer, no, you just have to be gracious and kind. All the other stuff is outside of your control. And yes, I think it could be frustrating to be checking in every week, every month, but that's unfortunately the process. There are not a lot of UX openings right now. Again, I think UX is about as important as any role, but there just are limited opportunities in UX. So there's really nothing else you can do other than you could ask that direct question to your sourcer too. Like, what can I do? Like, you can say, I appreciate all your help, but I'm just trying to figure out what I can do. But they're likely going to give the same answer as I gave. So I know that's not a great response. Continue doing what you're doing, but double down on the internal employees. If you're not engaging with them and pushing them to help you, that's just another step. I'm sure it's an action you're taking, but please double down on that item as well. I hope that helps. New York, amazing. It's my Northeast is where I originally grew up. Hey, Corey, good to see you. I'm glad you can make it today. I hope you had a great weekend as well. Thanks for being here as always. SF, thanks for being here. Virginia, okay, and Charlotte, North Carolina. Okay, so we have a lot of people coming from both coasts, and I think did I see a Germany in there somewhere, or am I making that up? I thought I saw that. Maybe I just made that up in my mind. Okay, so we're already at a question. So please, you're on this live stream to get answers to your questions. It does not have to be about working in big tech. This is pretty much an open forum. We talk about interviewing, negotiation, anything in the career space. And also, it doesn't have to be a question. It can come in the form of feedback or information. A lot of times, the community is driving information. Okay, wow, from Mexico, amazing. And India, now it's getting really, really late. So thank you for being here. So as I wait for questions to come in, do you still want to work in big tech was kind of the question I posed before today's live. As a YouTube creator, we're always trying to draw the audience in, but it is a question of, what you desire and what you're looking for, and understanding some of the challenges of joining big tech right now. Like, I had a negotiation client who joined Meta and got laid off after a month from Meta. But again, this is a great brand. Even if it's only for a month, that person is still going to have a story to tell. So one of the big things I try to push about big tech and why I still like working in big tech is the value of the brand. And if you've been on any of my live streams before, the value of the brand is extremely, extremely high. What it usually means is not only money and compensation that you're going to get up front, but it's money over time too, because of that brand is going to be really valuable. Those are a couple reasons. And of course, coming in the door, the compensation at these big tech companies, the stock is up. Now, will that always stay the same? No, it will shift up and down, but it's real money. And so I think sometimes people get frustrated that the base salaries maybe aren't high enough. But remember, these are total compensation companies. So you really want to be thinking about total comp. And big tech, it's usually and typically hard to beat their total comp. I can tell you that Meta and Amazon's offers, even Apple, I saw a recent Apple offer that was a little bit lower than expected, but Google's remained pretty consistent. Actually, some of their offers have been and continue to be better than I could imagine for some of my negotiation clients. It's just on the branding and comp piece. We'll get back to those. Let's dive into a couple of questions for now, and I'll keep kind of flipping back and forth, but obviously throw questions my way as they come in. Into your brain, that is. Hey, Jeff, follow Jeff's advice. I went against it and my success sucks. Emailing recruiters each time I get the reject email so quick. Okay, yeah, let's just talk about this. This is important, and remember, I'm fortunate enough to just have a ton of experience in the space, so I know it works, and I know what it like. Let's talk about like messaging recruiters because this is a great topic to just double down on. If you could see how many messages recruiters get, especially if people are able to find their email or message them on LinkedIn, it's always like, give me, give me, give me, right? So recruiters, they get so much of that they tend to even shut down messages. Like they won't look at their LinkedIn, they won't connect with people, they will not respond to messages, they just won't look. And that's why I recommend, if you're trying a networking strategy, try and figure out who the hiring manager is. That is easier said than done. But if you're going to a big tech company, it can be a little bit easier. You can find maybe a potential like program manager or something like that, and you reach out to them. Remember, when you're networking, especially on LinkedIn, give first. Hey, Sue, I found this awesome article on how AI is impacting program management. Check it out. Hoping to connect with you, or something simple like that. The giving model is such a switch up for them. They're just not used to seeing somebody who gives. So try that approach. Hey, it's a long-term strategy. Will it be super quick? No, but it's an approach that works. Reaching out and trying to like cold reach out to recruiters, it's not great. What do we know about recruiters? They tend to not be really organized, and they're just so used to seeing these reach outs that a different strategy can be successful. What, in your opinion, was the biggest benefit while working at Google? Well, so there were two major benefits, and great question. So the number one benefit was the brand. Again, obviously, I worked with a lot of smart people and I learned a lot, but the biggest thing I gained was the brand. I'm still making money off that brand. Now, do I want to be Jeff the Google guy for forever? No, I don't. Hopefully I've been really candid with the audience about that. But that niche has really helped me in my business. And then there's been a number of things. Like the brand is really so biggest benefit. So the brand was a huge benefit. Obviously, the compensation was a huge benefit. The free food, a benefit while eating, maybe not for my weight. But a couple of the biggest learnings that I had, I think the biggest thing I learned how to do at Google, which is translated really well in my time as an entrepreneur, is I learned how to ship. And so what does that mean? It means that sometimes things are not going to be 100% perfect. Even my course, which I absolutely love, I think it's killer. I baited my course for 15 months. I got tons of feedback, tons of advice, etc. Hey, look, there's a couple spelling errors in my course, but that wasn't enough for me to pull down the course, refilm all the stuff. So shipping is really important. Ship at 90-95%. It's going to be great. That was another big learning for me. And then I would say lastly, and I know I know you asked for maybe one, and I'm throwing a lot out there, but I think the biggest learning for me was that I didn't want to work for anybody anymore. Like that was a great learning. I worked at what's supposed to be the best company in the world, and I realized, okay, I wanted to take a different path, and that was a good learning for me as well. I know that was crazy and all over the place, but I hope that helps. How do you vet the team? Okay, this is a great question. Let's dive in. I have an upcoming on-site for UX in Google Cloud, but I've heard very mixed experiences from other UXRs who are currently working there. Some report truly awful experiences, while others report a great experience. Okay, this is extremely challenging, but let's talk through it. Your company absolutely does not matter if you do not have a great manager or leader. I know I'm stating the obvious, but in your conversations with the hiring manager, especially if you interview with a specific hiring manager, now a UXR role, probably a higher likelihood of speaking directly with the hiring manager in the interview process. You definitely want to get and ask for that follow-up call. And you want to check their positivity. What do you love about the team? What do you love about the company? What do you love about the role? What do you love about being a manager? If they are not giving you great answers to those questions, those could be some flags that you want to look out for. You also might want to say, hey, would it be possible to connect me with some team members? I'd really love to chat with them as well. Remember, this is all happening on the back end once they've decided to hire you. If they are not allowing you to talk to team members and they are not coming across as positive at all when you ask them questions about what they love about the organization, their role, their team, those are big, big flags. Now, could it be valuable to just get in the door, fight through some of those bad experiences for a year and get the brand on your background? Absolutely. And I people may not like that advice, but again, the value of the brand is great. But I think that there is a little bit of a misconception that um, working at Google is the perfect experience. It's great because of money, because of brand. And yes, there are some incredibly smart people there. I don't think anybody's going to question that. But is leadership across the board infallible and not capable of being bad like at any other company? No. No, there is a chance that you could end up with a bad lead, and that will ultimately determine whether you have a good experience or not. I hope that helps. What are the best cities for big tech? What about smaller up and coming cities for tech? Um, well, it depends on what country. I think in the U.S., I don't think it would be hard to argue that the Bay Area isn't the best. That doesn't mean you have to be in San Francisco. You could be anywhere up and down the Bay. Um, we could argue that, but I think it's hard to argue. Backup cities, some of the other best cities for tech in the US, absolutely. New York, Austin, Seattle, and Boston are all great cities for tech. Up and coming is more in North Carolina in that circle. We're seeing a little bit of a push to tech in a city like Miami, a little bit more in Southern California. So even Chicago has a push. That's in the US. Abroad, obviously, I love some of the classic cities, like I love Singapore abroad. I love London and Dublin. I think those are great cities for tech as well. Maybe Dublin a little bit better than London because London isn't quite paying for tech the way it should. I think if we go south, Mexico City has some really, really good opportunities. I'm sure there's a lot more, but those are some that are top of mind for me. Do you think there's room for negotiation for a Google national base salary between 132 and 193? If I want to ask for 210K base, is that a ridiculous ask? Um, no, I mean this is a great question because this is what I work on with my negotiation clients. Like what I tell them when you go into conversations with recruiters, you're not supposed to be the expert. So we're not supposed to really know if that band is flexible or not. But I think the biggest challenge for people going into Google is they get too fixated on the base salary. Look, I know the day to day in the Bay, like it's just devastatingly expensive in the Bay Area, but it's a total comp model. So if you're going after a job that's going to pay you, Bay Area is going to be at the top of that range, let's say 190, you're not going to land a job that has a 190 base that isn't paying into the 300s. So they don't look at base salary, they look at total comp. And oftentimes when people negotiate with Google, they're really disappointed in the base salary, but everything that Google is giving you is viable. It's real money. Even the bonuses are guaranteed. It's only like the bottom 5% that get needs improvement. And let's say it's an L5, for example, with a 15% target bonus. Even a needs improvement person's going to get like a 12 or 13% bonus. And obviously the equity is real. So um, I really push back on people because they'll be like, well, I'm earning this base. But I'll say, okay, well, you're earning a total of 200K and this offers 350K, and they'll get really, really fixated on the base. I understand the base pays the day to day. You're not going to get 210 for that, but you can ask for it, of course. Would love to hear any quick tips, best practices you may have from your experience consulting with companies. Long term, I love the idea of getting into the consulting and medium sized businesses around their talent attraction strategy. All right. Anybody who's on this live, I have an audience of 30 people. I'll be candid with you. All my corporate stuff to date since I launched that business, which was like 2.5 months ago, has been like really, really small, not a full-fledged. Nobody has gone in for my full-fledged corporate model. So again, it's a little slow. So we can get into it because it's I don't know. I think it's interesting. And again, we're a little slower today. So I did what I tried to do to attract corporate clients is obviously I'm trying to build partnerships and alliances, but I did 25 case studies for companies on their Glassdoor reviews, their LinkedIn, and their overall branding strategy. Of those 25 case studies that I did, only one company followed up, scheduled an appointment, and then they canceled it. And then when I followed up, they never got back to me. All 25 of these companies had embarrassingly bad Glassdoor reviews. They are so broken in their organization in terms of candidate experience, interviewer consistency, all the things that are just terrible about a company, and putting no stake into hiring processes and interview strategies. I think the challenge is that the best practices is that it's not valuable unless the company sees value in it. And it's very, very hard to train corporations on how much money they're truly wasting. I mean, especially when we get into the bigger companies, I mean, it's millions and millions and millions of dollars because they don't know how to hire. But trying to translate that into value, I have found to be difficult so far in my journey. I'm trying to niche down a little bit more into interviewer training to get in the door. So that's kind of the newest strategy, but it has not been very successful to date, candidly. So it's still a work in progress. Obviously, I'm trying to work both sides of the coin, but Corey, it's been tough. So I'm trying to work on a new strategy. I'll let the audience know a little bit more about that as it comes together. Yeah, an L5 role, a UX L5 role. I even think 193. Like, I don't think they're going to pay you that, even in the Bay. No, they have that range for a reason, but into the 200s, I've never seen into the 200s for an L5 UX role in the Bay. Now, keep in mind, things are constantly changing. I just had a negotiation client. I'm going to keep this totally vague, but I just had a negotiation client where we got such a ridiculous compensation for a role that it was just so far outside of the bounds of what I believed that role for that level and that market would pay. But sometimes we just push the envelope. And, I've had some of those cases where the comp can be ridiculous. So I never want to shut you down. And remember, when we're anchoring, let's go ridiculous. If you're going to anchor with a company like a Google, go big. They are not going to rescind your offer because you go big. Also think about the thresholds. Let's say we think a UXR role in the Bay is going to pay, I don't know, let's say mid threes. Let's say 350 total comp, all in, base, bonus, and equity. Then you should be anchoring with a threshold of, let's say you think it's going to make 350, then anchor at 444, 500 or something. So you're not anchoring over 100K what you think it will pay. You're anchoring below that 450 threshold. So I look at it in like 50K thresholds. Are we going above 450? Are we going up to the top of the fours? Or are we moving into the fives? Because if the role is going to pay in the threes, we don't want to anchor in the fives. The role is going to pay in the threes. I want to anchor in the fours. That's just kind of my mental mindset, because when you talk to the recruiter and they talk to the comp analyst, like, the bigger the number above what they think they're going to pay, it's a mental thing. I hope that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense, come back. Sometimes what I'm saying, it makes sense in my head, but I want to make sure it's clear to the audience. Why do you think it is important to address this question in today's times? Are we seeing a lot of people moving away from wanting to work in big tech? Can we talk a bit about that? Yeah, I think we are seeing a little bit of movement away from big tech. I think there's continues to be a growing concern about a lack of trust, privacy issues in regards to big tech gobbling up the smaller companies. I think that we have seen a drive towards, hey, maybe I want to work for a smaller company. I think let's call it the reality of these bigger companies too. There's a lot of process, there's a lot of red tape. And as these companies get bigger and bigger and bigger, it's harder to get things done. More process. And look, again, candidly, that's the way I experienced Google. In 2013, 2014, the receptiveness to my bigger ideas and implementing my bigger ideas was much more open. 2015 and beyond, more process, more red tape. It got harder to do things. And when I first started, it was there was only one layer of leadership between me and the director. By the time I left, I had actually been promoted. I had moved up the ladder and I had like 3 or 4 chains of leadership above me before the director level. So, yeah, I think that people are feeling a little bit of the weight of the big company, lots of process, lots of red tape, and then just a little bit of a lack of trust. And with the layoffs, there's a little bit of a lack of trust too, because people are coming in and getting laid off pretty quickly. They left their job just to go into a company just to be laid off. And I mentioned earlier in the conversation, I just had somebody, a negotiation client who joined Meta. They laid that person off after a month. So I think that there is a little bit less trust when going into big tech. And that's kind of the sentiment that I've seen is just people are pushing back and questioning, hey, should I maybe go to a smaller company because these big companies maybe aren't quite as stable as they used to be. Hey, Nat. Hey, you're in lesson 36 of 68 in one day of your course, and it's amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. And by the way, $200 off the interview mastery course if you use the coupon code MAY, M-A-Y. That'll be available just till 11:59 Pacific time today. If you play all out in that course and any course you take, you're going to have massive success, right? Like the vast majority, like I could give you the statistics on people who completed my course. On average, it's like any other course. It's probably 10% of people will take the entire course, do all the exercises, do everything. But I guarantee if you play all out, you do great. Can you recommend recruiting as a career path? Not sure this is something for me, but curious. Sarah, I wouldn't recommend it. And so I think recruiting is going to be one of the first positions that disappears with AI. There's just sourcing, like the ability to find creatively find candidates and build a solid pipeline is one thing, but recruiting, you can automate out everything. You can automate out the initial reach outs, the assessments. You could really map out a very, very clear path with resources. What's the plan? What's the timeline? What does the process look like? Then you can automate the scheduling through a system. Then you can automate the follow ups. You can even automate negotiation. I know it sounds crazy, but I don't think now is the right time to get into recruiting. I think that it's a dying industry. And I think that in the next couple years, how many recruiters are still left out there? It's going to be small. Secondarily, you'd be competing against 30, 40, 50,000 talent acquisition professionals who have the backing of companies like Google, Meta, Amazon. I mean, there's so many of them on the market. It doesn't feel that way because a lot of them are kind of chilling out, taking that severance. But it's just not my recommendation. I don't want to stop you from doing it, but I think that it's a position that's not going to exist for a long period of time. Okay. Okay, Michael. So you got HC approved last Thursday, already T matched. How soon can I expect the initial numbers? It's usually surprising when you pass HC, you get T matched, and the recruiter is not asking you to provide some initial numbers. You can have them go first. I just want to be really clear. I have not seen that as a negative. Um, if if you're going into Google and they go first and then you anchor, It hasn't meant less money for any of my clients. Now, you may want to go in and anchor first. The biggest thing I'll tell you with Google, negotiate the equity. The equity is the biggest piece. Sign-ons are pretty common, right? But the equity is the biggest driver. Whatever you think you want to get for equity, double it, triple it, quadruple it. That's going to be the number that's going to be the easiest for them to move. Base is going to be less easy. The bonus is obviously set in stone. And sign-ons, yeah, maybe a small sign-on. Up to 50K is what they'll give you in a sign-on from L3 to L7, but 50K is less common. I hope that helps, but you should already at least have the initial numbers if you've gone through this, especially if it was last Thursday, or they should have asked for your numbers. We're at the half hour. I just want to do a quick prompt. Practiceinterviews.com. I do one-on-one interview and one-on-one negotiation coaching quickly. $200 off. It's a great deal off the interview mastery course. If you use the coupon code MAY, that's available just till 11:59 Pacific time today. Tons of free resources at practiceinterviews.com. We have a Slack group with 4,000 people, 9 great free resources that you can utilize on the website. New original content every other Monday, and I go live every Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific time. If you like what I'm doing today, smash that like button. If you've never subscribed, consider subscribing. Hey, Corey, I love your call out earlier to an important learning being you don't want to work for anybody. I feel like that's something many people are learning currently with the options for entrepreneurship. Okay. I just feel like I need to get like some sort of affiliate link or money from recommending this book, but I think it is such a critical data point that we talk about. I don't believe that everybody will believe what I'm about to say, but it's actually been proven. People cannot and are unable to accurately judge other people. This has been proven in multiple studies. So what does that mean? I'm taking this right from the 9 lies about work. Lie number 6, people can accurately judge or rate others. So what does that mean? It means that your manager cannot accurately rate you. Why? Because they have a set idea of what's good and what's not good. And you can either fall into that bucket, like let's say they're very analytical and you're very analytical, they're going to like you. But if you're not, they're not going to like you. Add more people to the mix and they all have their laser focus of how they look at things. So adding more people to the mix actually doesn't help. We cannot accurately rate or judge others. So what does that mean? Your success is so dependent on having this kind of mental alignment with your lead. How often does that happen? Not very often. So in my experience, let's talk about my experience at Google. I had multiple managers. The managers who we had alignment with, the one I got promoted from, we were fully aligned. The one before I got promoted, we were not aligned. And that was my best performance, my best numbers. I was doing everything at the highest level. But my ratings weren't as high as they should have been because we weren't mentally aligned. Even though the numbers and all the projects would back up that I had deserved promotion earlier. When I switched managers, that happened very quickly because of that mental alignment. It's really interesting. If you've never read The 9 Lies About Work, it is a fantastic book. I strongly recommend it. But yeah, I got to tell you, one of the best feelings in the world is being your own boss. It doesn't mean that you won't get upset with yourself on given days for not accomplishing things. But being your own boss removes that ambiguity of waking up every day and not really knowing what's coming your way. You can anticipate and plan for that. But you might end up getting upset with yourself, which I've been known to do from time to time. Great question, Corey. Why do recruiters ask if we have an offer or no? Are there any reasons beyond expediting the interview process? How does a recruiter take the information of having a job and still interviewing? Okay, so I would say that the good recruiters will ask that question because they're trying to understand, like, should I drive the process or not? Like, how active are you? So a better question is, how active are you in your current job search? Are you actively interviewing? Are you in the beginning, middle, or end of the process? Do you have any current offers in hand? So just follow up with some specific questions. But a good recruiter is going to try and find out what else you have going on. Um, and when I did a little bit of recruiting, I had a recruiting client after I left Google. This is in my top 3 questions, is to figure out what else is going on, because they'll be able to help you better if they understand the urgency level. And if recruiters aren't asking that question every single time in a first conversation, they're missing a really valid data point that might lose them candidates later in the process, because candidates aren't always going to be forthcoming. So great question. Do you think, while applying to jobs in the US, international experience is not looked upon as strong experience? I had a recruiter tell me that they look at international experience differently. Ugh, ugh. I hate that. I hate that. I don't like that at all. Why would it matter where your experience was? Experience is experience. And really, I don't like that answer. That's just terrible. That is incredibly biased and just totally unacceptable. Just because you are working in a different country, it doesn't take away from that experience. So I do not agree with that statement at all. Love to know your opinion on a 20% ask increase salary for my base after a year of working as a full stack engineer. Is low or high? Um, well, it depends on the company, right? I do think that 20% is on the higher end. So let's actually take a step back and then come back, Gabriel, and tell us a little bit more information so I can help, as long as you feel comfortable, of course. Um, when asking for a pay raise, you definitely want to go in with a plan. So I would go in with like a 1 pager highlighting all the specific contributions you've made over the last year to validate and justify a pay increase, whether that's 10, 15, 20, 25%, whatever you decide to go with. If for any reason that is denied, tell your specific lead or manager, I want to work on a plan. It's really important to me that I'm driving up my compensation. Let's come up with a plan that we could revisit in 3 months to revisit a salary increase. And you work on that plan. So if you complete that plan, you're driving towards something very, very specific. But maybe if you can tell us more, I can be more helpful. 20% on a year over year pay raise without a promotion of some sort would be definitely on the higher end. As you've told, I took breaks after hypothetical questions, but interviewer told me that it was awkward and I should ask for time every time. Yeah, you should ask for time every time. Remember, if you, I don't want you to ask, first of all, like, let's throw that ask thing. You're going to tell, but it's in a really nice way. But otherwise, it's just awkward if they ask the question and you go silent. You have to engage with them every single time. So every single time you say, and again, my fake interviewer, as most people know, is always Sue. Sue, I'm going to take a minute to gather my thoughts. And then the next time, Sue, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just take about a minute to gather my thoughts. Sue, you know it's coming. I just need a minute to put my thoughts together for this answer. So yeah, you do need to reiterate every time, because it's just kind of like the common expectation. Otherwise, like, they don't know. They're kind of in limbo. But if you say it, then you're just kind of, it's an acknowledgement. I know it's a little weird. I get it. But yeah, say it every time. That will help. Could working for the federal government restrict someone from working at another company? Currently, I have an offer from the US government and I don't want it to be an issue down the line. And the position requires clearance. No, no, I've never seen that as an issue. Um, I think that there are some real benefits to working for the government. It's just really having to work through probably a lot of red tape. It's incredibly regulated, right? You have to follow a lot of policy, procedure. So oftentimes I look at that as a good thing, not a bad thing. I don't think that that's going to restrict somebody from working for another company. I haven't personally seen that. As you Okay. Yes, sorry. Same answer as before. Just make sure you acknowledge every time. Otherwise, again, I have my clients do this. And when I do my one on one sessions, I'm like, tell me you're taking time. Because when you just stop, it's not comfortable for your interviewer. No matter how many times they've interviewed, it's just not comfortable. So you just got to reiterate. Okay, so how to get hired at FAANG, how to check job trends at these big tech companies. So, I mean, I'll go back to the basics of the first part of your question. I mean, how to get hired at a FAANG company, like you got to put in the work. And, I think that this is something that, people are going to have some level of interest in doing. And maybe not everybody has the level of interest, but you're trying to get into the elite companies of the world. The people that go from application to getting hired, it's a very, very low percentage. So you beat out the competition by preparing and practicing like crazy, right? And whether that's engineering to hop on Leak Code or Pramp or any of these sites that you're going to practice, or if it's just straight up practice because you're going after a program manager role, you got to practice with other human beings. You got to write down your answers and you got to work at it consistently. Trends, there's a number of resources you can look online for trends, and I can tell you that people in our Slack community are posting those trends sometimes. So you can join that by joining our Slack group. It's at practiceinterviews.com, individual side under free resources. A GCP sales role with 2 years of experience, minimum qualifications should be L4. It could be an L3. I mean, 2 years of experience. L3s can be hired with, up to 5 years of experience. So it could be an L3. But yeah, I mean, typically GCP sales roles will start 4 and above, but I've seen some 3s. So anything's possible. Yeah. If you have more questions, let me know. How to react to every question, even if I know the answer. Okay, so let's actually talk about this. Let's double down on this. I think this is really critical for the audience. Let's say we get tell me about a time you had a conflict with another coworker at work. It's like, okay, this is a very straightforward question. We've practiced the conflict question probably a number of times, but just building some space allows you to take a breath, think through it. And the biggest thing is like mostly on the behavioral side, it's like, okay, I know the answer I want to give, but what's the pivot point? Now, that's a very straightforward question, but oftentimes the questions we look for the pivot point. Where should the actions start? And that's where I want you to take your time and think, okay, the conflict started, like, where should I start my action? And again, if we're going to the conflict question, the first action is when you first sat down one-on-one with Jane to discuss through it. It's not all the background, all the noise, all that other information that's not valuable. So slowing down is a little bit just about taking our breath and taking time to breathe and then diving in. It doesn't always have to be a minute, especially in the behavioral side, but slowing down, I guarantee your answers will be way, way better. And for a lot of behavioral questions, especially like thinking about that pivot point can be critical. I did a video on that if you want to check it out. And then on the hypothetical side, absolutely, you need to take a minute, think about your clarifying questions, your framework, and building in assumptions before you answer. Okay, so again, no need to double up on the questions. I'll get to all of them. Thanks. Oh, 100%. This is why performance evaluations are pure BS. Totally. Performance evaluations are garbage. They don't mean anything because people cannot accurately determine somebody else's performance. Now, occasionally there's jobs where performance can be tracked, but it still can yield not the results you want. So let me bring up a personal example. I got laid off from my job in 2009, but I'll be candid with you. It wasn't really a layoff. I didn't get along with my manager. They wanted to push me out. And at the time I got laid off, they gave me all these reasons, but I was their number one performer, meaning that statistically, I had the best numbers of any person in that role, but I was the only one that got laid off. So it is BS. It doesn't matter. It's more about a person's vision, relationship than the numbers sometimes. So it's a really frustrating thing to hear, and I believe people could push back, but remember, we live in our own lane and zone. And so again, read the 9 Lies About Work, get it on Audible, buy the hard copy, whatever, however you like to read, but it is a super, super interesting book that I recommend anybody in corporate America or corporate anywhere that you read that book. And too often it's used as a tool to push people out, especially good ones, that bad managers that don't want that employee around. 100%. So how do you know? How do you really know? I mean, I put a LinkedIn poll out on this, and I think it returned around 30%. How many people had been judged that they were doing a great job and a poor job by doing the same job, but having two different managers? And it was like 30% of people had said that. And that's been my experience multiple times in my career. One manager thinks I'm doing great. The other manager thinks I'm doing terrible, but I'm just working the same way I've always been working. Now, as employees, part of it is our job to learn how to adapt and adjust and change for that manager. We shouldn't have to, though. So great point. Yeah, it's a little frustrating, and I know it's a hard to believe thing, but it's true. The initial numbers did come from the recruiter. It's already higher than what I find on levels.fyi, but they need to check with the comp team from the initial numbers. Okay, this is for an L4 suite and a middle cost of living. So if anybody sees LCOL, MCOL, and HCOL, that's usually low, middle, and high cost of living. Now, if you're in a middle cost of living, L4 suite, middle cost of living, I mean, I would expect you to be in the 300s in total comp at least. So make sure that you are really pushing and negotiating. Even if it's higher than what you anticipated, push the envelope. There's no negative or downside. The worst thing that they can say is we're not adding anything to it, but you've got to negotiate and get in there. You're going to make so much more money if you push that anchor. Trust me. I had a 30-minute call with HM. It was only 20 minutes before they said they got all they wanted. Is this a good sign? What is a good indicator of a good interview? Okay, so without all the data, I mean, I always want it to go the full length or longer, but that's a personality type. That doesn't mean it's good or bad. Everybody's different. So if I'm making a snap judgment, I can't really say for sure. If they just ended it at 20 minutes and didn't allow for your questions, I would be very concerned about working for that person, because if they didn't allow for your questions, that would be really troubling, challenging. They need to allow you to ask questions, maybe a little bit more data, and I can be more helpful. Please. Sad to see how quickly you didn't recommend recruiting earlier. How are things changing? On point with your answer, though, I believe there'll be so few recruiting spots in the future. Hard to recommend a career path knowing what could be very well coming. Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I know that a lot of people would disagree with me, but I use the Waymo analogy, and this is really fun for me. So anybody who wants to hang out and listen to me, of course, hang out. But I use the Waymo analogy. What's Waymo? Waymo is Google's self-driving car division. What do we know? If we put only Waymo cars on the road globally right now, what would happen? Less accidents, better traffic flow, and just overall better safety, better results if humans were not driving cars. Why does this not exist today? Why do we not have just full self-driving cars and no humans are driving cars? It's probably like the human ego, right? Like we think we're better than a self-driving car. We're not. We're distracted. We're tired. Things just happen, right? So I use this same analogy with recruiting. If you removed all recruiters from the process today, the candidate experience would go up. I guarantee it. There'd be no more ghosting, no more lack of understanding, like what are the steps, because all this could be outlined and automated. And so I think if you had all the systems in place, removing recruiters would create a better overall brand for the organization. And people would feel better about recruiters because they never have the things that people hate the most about recruiters, which is ghosting, lack of organization, lack of follow-up. That could all be automated. So recruiters believing that they are this necessary cog, yeah, of course, in the wheel, of course, some recruiters are great and they do actually provide tremendous value. But I would say holistically, that's not the case. Yeah, sorry, Corey. I know I don't want to knock the recruiting role, but I see what's coming down the pipe. And AI is going to, the pace of AI is not, it's not getting slower. It's getting significantly faster on a daily basis. And while I think probably this audience is maybe more tapped into AI or in tech, we're talking about tech, the vast majority of people still aren't understanding the impact and how much our lives are going to change, and the entire job ecosystem is going to change. And I actually lost, I was on TikTok before bed last night watching, a lot of my feed is AI, just thinking about how am I going to keep a job over the next 3 to 5 years? Like what couldn't be automated out in terms of what I do? So it's just something we constantly need to be thinking about. It's really, really important that we're pivoting, adapting, and adjusting as quickly as possible. I have a team match call, and they put 3 people on the call, including the hiring manager, the head of the entire division, and another really senior adjacent IC. Is this a change to the normal team match process? Taylor, there are no rules. So the team match can be whatever that team prefers. Oftentimes it's just a one-on-one. There's tons of value in the one-on-one, but they can literally do whatever they want. So this is not an adjustment. It's just a little less common or a lot less common. Go in. Great enthusiasm. Stand. Get that great body language. Come in with a huge smile. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. I'm really excited to meet with all 3 of you today, and I'm happy to take whatever direction you like in this conversation. Boom. Instantly a fantastic first impression. They're going to like you right away. Then, of course, in the team match, great answers to tell me about yourself, why the company, and then be ready to ask them great questions and ask the questions directly. So if it's Sue, Jane, and Bob, Sue, can you tell me a little bit more about X? Bob, I'd love to know a little bit more about Y. Positive, positive, positive questions, but take it as a really positive opportunity. But is it common? It's not as common as the one-on-one. Much appreciated. Got invited to a Google interview for an intern position. It was the very first call after 2 months. I got the rejection. Sure, there's plenty of reasons why, but what are the most common reasons you went with other candidates? How to ask for relocation to the US. I know it's a tricky one because of the visa situation. So, I simply went with other candidates because typically it's just interview feedback. That's it. It's just one candidate had better interview feedback. I knew that it was going to be a much stronger likelihood of getting them through hiring committee. So it's typically only feedback. The rest of the stuff I could care less about. Overall experience, background, education or lack of education, it really all fell in the interview feedback. And then reload to the US. Yeah, you can always ask when you get into the process, like, hey, is this a job that will sponsor me to come to the US? I think it's also really valuable. I know that this is easier said than done, but if you are going to reload, it's typically easier to get the job or internship in your home country and then get into the organization and then transfer. It's just an easier path, but always be talking to recruiters about sponsorship. That's something you want to learn up front. I hope that helps. Yes, Corey, just, I mean, so I just want to talk about this for a second. Everybody who's ever been on my lives knows that I'll go down different paths that I think provide value. This is all trying to drive towards value. I strongly recommend, if you can take in anything from an auditory perspective. I mean, obviously, I love Audible. I think that people do not listen at appropriate speeds, meaning that you'd be shocked at how much content and information you can absorb on 2x, especially me. If you were to go back and watch this live on 2x, you would literally lose nothing. The speed of 2x is not as fast as you think, so getting adjusted to that. And then the reason why I love learning in an auditory sense, if you go for a walk, if you go for a bike ride, you're in the car, you can constantly always be learning. Even my office from my home to my office is 0.6. So I ride my beach cruiser. I'm really fortunate to be in San Diego, so the weather doesn't really interrupt me any time of year. And from the time I put my earbuds on, go down, grab my bike, park it, come into the office, get my breakfast, yeah, it's probably only 10 to 15 minutes of learning time. But on 2x, if I just did an hour just in the morning on that, on 2x, then that's 2 hours of learning per week. I think we're not looking at these little moments to add our learnings. And then when you 2x everything, you can get through books twice as fast. Definitely take a look at that book. I think it's a great one. Totally agree. I had a manager who gave me bad reviews when we were both. Then we both got a newer manager for both of us, and now I'm best friends with him. Managers matter. Managers are everything. People don't leave companies because of compensation or culture. They do, but the number one reason they leave is typically a lack of appreciation, and the lack of appreciation almost always comes from your direct manager or leader. There's so much ambiguity because we could get hired at a company. We love Sue. Sue is the bomb. Sue treats us like gold. 3 months into it, Sue's so good, she gets promoted, and we have a new manager, Bob, and Bob's not good. So we can't control our manager even coming in. We don't know. Like, we've usually only spoken to them once or twice. Obviously, if you can have that follow-up conversation, I recommend it. But it's really hard to know how they're going to manage till we get in the door, and then things change all the time. So it's really, really difficult to control that item. I would appreciate any advice on keeping up the interviewing momentum. My field of UX research was heavily hit by layoffs, and new opportunities are few and far between, with loads of very qualified candidates. You're getting a full loop with a single company once every 2 to 3 months. Okay. So much of what I recommend is incredibly difficult. But and remember, everybody's style is unique, so not everybody's going to attach to this. I recommend a plan. And so my plan would be, okay, for 2 things to consider. What is my downtime? What is my downtime where I typically have time? Is that 8 to 9 p.m. on weekdays? Is that 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. on weekends? Like, when do I have downtime? Then I would put that into my calendar. I think it's also really critical to know your zones. So there's 3 typical zones. We all have a green, yellow, and red zone. So our green zone is where we get all of our work done. We operate at the highest level. Then there's our yellow zone where we're operating okay, but it's maybe not our peak. And then there's our red zone where we don't operate great. It's not a coincidence that I do these lives in the morning. The morning tends to be my green zone. That can definitely extend well into the afternoon for me, but mornings are typically my green zone. It's where I do a lot of my business work. That's where I do my lives. That's where I do a lot of my YouTube and content work. I take a lot of clients in the afternoon. That consistency in all the client work has allowed me to build up the skill set to maybe not be in my full green zone, but be, partial green, partial yellow, but be thinking about your zones. Because if you're always trying to do interview prep at night, but that's your red zone, it's not going to work out well. I hope that helps. I hope that wasn't confusing. Thank you so much. My current pay is $70K. At a new job for a FAANG company, I saw on levels that the average pay is $60K. Any tips on how to get 90K? What would be a good anchor? Levels. I love levels. It's a great resource. We are incredibly fortunate and lucky to have it. When I was at Google, it did not exist. So people didn't have as good of an idea. Levels is not 100% correct. However, they're capturing the information, it's just not always 100% correct. So I just want to state that. I know it's supposed to be driven off of offer letters, et cetera, et cetera. Some of that information is just incorrect. Okay. If you're earning 70K, it says the average pay is 60K. Remember, if you're a good negotiator, you're always going to get more. On how to get at least 90K, it's just not something I can guarantee. I would recommend anchoring above the number you want. So that might mean you have to anchor over 100K. If you're doing that, make sure that you understand the company you're negotiating with. Smaller companies can rescind if you go too big on your anchor. So try and understand how they like to negotiate. And sometimes, unfortunately, we just have to ask that direct question if we're really unsure. What is your compensation negotiation philosophy? If they don't negotiate, they should tell you that right up front, but a lot of times they won't. I hope that helps, but the best way to get more money is to anchor above the number you want, typically 20 to 30% above what you want, but know the organization. That's really important. Bit more info. We went through the interview and I was a bit nervous, but didn't suck. At the 20-minute mark, she said she had all she wanted, and I got a chance to ask questions. Been 3 days, no update. Okay. I would say I would check in with your recruiter later in the day tomorrow if you haven't heard back, or Thursday morning would be my recommendation if you haven't heard back. Sometimes they're just talking to a lot of people, so it might be nothing. Just continue to check in and let us know what happens. And good luck. Thanks for the feedback. By the way, the new job is in a new location and in a different country. Okay. Same rules apply. Just understand their overall negotiation philosophy. What do you think about the current situation of tech recruiters? What are your predictions for this and next year in context of big tech? I think tech recruiters are in trouble. I think that if I were to guess, I'd say that 90% of people who got laid off from Google, Meta, and Amazon, throw Microsoft into the mix too, they're going to make less money if they find a job at all. There are just there's more recruiters available in the US from those layoffs than recruiter jobs, unless they're willing to go to an agency, which most corporate recruiters aren't willing to do because they will not get nearly the compensation to go to an agency. So I think they're in trouble. The whole industry is in trouble. It's not going to be a job in 5 years. And honestly, it shouldn't be a job in the next 1 to 2 years. And I do think that the biggest other item I'll reference and mention is that the tech recruiters that are taking their severance and sitting back and not doing anything are going to be the ones that are in the most trouble. Now, I understand there needs to be mental processing. Everybody's going to go through that experience at a different rate, a different amount of time. But the ones that are sitting back on the severance and saying, oh, I'll look later this year, I'll look next year because my severance pays through this year, the market's getting tighter and tighter. And so my recommendation is, hey, recruiting is a sales job. Essentially, sales jobs come and go quickly. If you got laid off, take the time to process, but get out there because there's going to be less jobs. They're going to pay less. And so a little bit of it is a mental reset. And then I encourage tech recruiters to find the or other jobs that will get them out of recruiting, because I think that industry is going to be totally automated very, very soon. I hope that helps. 3 favorite resources for technical prep. That's a hard one for me to answer because I think that I would pick definitely for, if we're talking like heavy duty technical prep, like sweet prep, then I would absolutely utilize any of those free resources like Leak Code. Like you got to be practicing your code. That's one. I think people really like that cracking the coding interview book. So I think that would be another good one. And then just, I know this is going to sound silly, but the technical prep needs to be backed by the soft skills. You're more likely to get hired for a technical role in 2023 if you have the soft skills. So the third piece would be to not forget those soft skills and really focus in on your behavioral answers and then some hypothetical answers as well. I hope that helps. We're out of questions. Let me prompt on my services. We still have a pretty good audience here, so I'm happy to take any additional questions. Otherwise, we can wrap up. But if you use the coupon code MAY, M-A-Y, I'm offering $200 special offer off my interview mastery course. That's available till just 11:59 p.m. Pacific time today. One-on-one interview and negotiation coaching. I go live 10 a.m. Pacific time every single Tuesday. New original content every other Monday. If I have a hiccup with either of those, I will message the YouTube community specifically. If you like what I've done today, smash that like button. If you've never subscribed, consider subscribing. And tons of free resources on practiceinterviews.com. Slack group, 9 free resources. Let's dive back into some questions. Your interview tips have been incredibly helpful, and thanks to them, I landed my dream job at Google. Amazing. Congrats. I say the same thing to everybody. I was a very small part of your journey. It's really about taking the tips and applying them with prep and practice and strategy. So congrats. And let's see what's going on. So you initially applied for a position. It seems to be fully remote. Okay. However, during the interview process, I learned I would actually need to relocate to Texas. I agreed to this because I didn't want to jeopardize my chances by expressing my reluctance to move. I'm wondering if you could provide me with some advice on how to approach my recruiter and discuss my current situation. I appreciate your insights and guidance. Okay, cool. This is really tricky. This has obviously happened a lot more since COVID. It's remote, then it's not remote. So let's talk about it in two different facets. So facet one is relocation is all about our personal situation. And so I would say if you do not have a mortgage, do not have children, do not have pets, you're just renting, and you and your significant other can actually do it, it's definitely worth exploring because the value of the Google brand is priceless. I'm going to assume Austin. I don't know for sure. I mean, that's the biggest market, but you can come back and tell me. So that's step one, just something to consider. It's just kind of the secondary item. Now, the first item is you just want to have a candid conversation with your recruiter. So we come in, let's say our recruiter is Jane. Just say, hey, Jane, I want to have a candid conversation with you. Obviously, when we first started talking, this job was remote. Now it's in Texas. Like, what am I giving up here? Like, is there another potential opportunity to get a remote role? Can I push back on getting this remote? Or if I say no to Texas, am I just done? Like, that's a very, very easy conversation to have with them. I obviously want you to judge the relationship you've had with them to date, but throw it out there. They're going to get it, like just from a human element and anything you can do to provide context that would humanize it a little bit more, because sometimes recruiters forget that human element, I think would be helpful. Come back. Let me know if you have any other questions. 3 top books to recommend that helped you immensely in your career-wise, but also personally. So the foundational book for me is Think and Grow Rich. And Think and Grow Rich, the reason why is almost all self-help and like business books in some way or another were built off of that foundational book. If you haven't read Think and Grow Rich, read it. It's an old book, right? We're approaching 100 years old on that book. I know it's crazy, but Think and Grow Rich should be like your foundational book. I always really liked and still like The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. I mean, I think that kind of just, it will help you with some mindset shifts. And then I think one of the other two foundational books would be Atomic Habits and the Compound Effect. They're very similar books, but it talks about building good habits and building on those habits and being consistent. And so one of the funniest things about Atomic Habits and the Compound Effect is that's what I'm doing right now. I just show up every single week for these lives. Could I have stopped doing these lives? Yeah, the audience is about a fourth, a fifth of what the audience was in every live session last year. But if I had just stopped showing up for my audience, what does that mean for my business? So, I think I've been pretty straightforward and candid. My business is down about 75 to 80%. That tracks across the board. My YouTube views and subscribers are down about 75 to 80%. The amount of tech openings are down about 75 to 80%. So everything tracks across the board. So I could have just decided to give up and move on and do something else, or I can compound effect it and keep doing it. So I think those are my like 3 foundational books, but I try to read about a book a week, give or take. So my Audible list is pretty long and extensive, but those are 3 or 4 really good foundational ones. Great question. Elements of Programming Interviews is also a great book for technical prep. Thank you so much for that. I haven't heard of that one, but absolutely. Anything and everything, right? To get great resources. All learning is going to be beneficial in my opinion. Yeah, Austin. Okay. And I mean, Austin's kind of like, we know Austin's a little bit of a tricky market, right? The housing costs went crazy overnight there. It's still a really fun city. I know it's kind of its own entity within Texas, its own little bubble, its own little tech bubble, but it is a fun city. Music's great food. And if you can afford to do it and you're not really locked in, I would recommend it. And again, I always recommend it just for the value of the brand. And usually the upfront comp you're going to make is typically people are coming in the door and making significantly more, typically. How do you see AI impacting TPM roles? Great question. I think program management is one of those roles that's a little bit more protected. There's a little bit more of the human element because so much of the program management job is leading without authority, herding cats, right? Are things on budget, on time? Are we managing the milestones? Do we have a good risk mitigation plan in place? And I just, AI is a little farther away from that. The program manager role, whether it's technical or non-technical, is so driven by people and communication that to me, it's one of the safest roles for the next 3 to 5 years. In the next 5 years, we have no idea what this world is going to look like, but I think it's going to look very, very different. But I think that's one of the safest jobs, in my opinion. And, it's kind of funny. It's like, that's a safe job. I think that people who are in like contractor roles, plumbers, electricians, like the really hands-on, like kind of like skilled labor jobs, I think those are very, very safe as well. Just kind of a sidebar. 2025. That's when I think the job market will improve because I think all the trends, the recessionary trends, if you see any market trends, 2025 is probably when we see an uptick in the market. But again, a lot of that will depend on the financial system, the banking system. That's the only concerning item. But I think 2025 is when we'll see the market pick back up. So a year and a half away is when I think we'll see a change. Any thoughts or tips on when it's the best time to jump to from corporate to more entrepreneurship, or do you believe it's best to build something while in a full-time role? 100% the latter. You should be building a side hustle while you have a full-time job. Over 90% of people will start a business in that way. There are very, very few people who are fortunate enough to start a business without a full-time job. And I'm one of them. And the only reason why I could do that was because I financially planned while I was at Google and I did not sell any stock. And so I thought to myself, and I'll be quite honest, like having a financial plan is the biggest step to being a good entrepreneur. And I decided that I was willing to make no money for 2 years to try and become an entrepreneur because I live a very, very lean life. It's not flashy at all. And so I thought, hey, I could just sell stock for a couple of years, live very lean, very thin. And if I don't make any money after 2 years, I need to consider getting a job. But I was in a very, very rare scenario. Almost everybody starts with a side hustle. And that's what I recommend. And so the biggest things, if you're going to become an entrepreneur, you have to have a financial plan. The financial planning is absolutely the number one. Two, marketing. How are you going to market your product or service? Because nothing sells if you don't market it. And that's YouTube is my marketing funnel. I don't run ads. I don't do anything. I funnel all my marketing through free content. That was my marketing strategy and has remained consistent for 4.5 years. So I have a marketing plan. And then the last thing I just recommend up front, and there's a million things, is niche down. If you're trying to sell to everybody, you're selling to nobody. So those are my 3 recommendations, but back it up with a side hustle, start to build it, figure out what you like doing. That's a great way to start. Okay. We're out of questions. I'm going to pause for a second. Again, we still have a pretty good audience today. So just wanted to see if any other additional questions come in. The coupon code, again, one more time, I'll throw it out there, is MAY, M-A-Y. If you use that coupon code just today till 11:59 Pacific time, $200 off the interview mastery course, one-on-one interview and negotiation coaching, all available at practiceinterviews.com. The site has tons of free resources. I rarely talk about the blog. I haven't written on the blog in a while. I'm going to double down on that. And I can tell you also, I've partnered with a company in Toronto, and I'm going to be pushing a pretty heavy shorts agenda. So you should be seeing a lot more shorts coming up from me as well. I also don't highlight the corporate channel as much, but I do have some corporate videos on the other YouTube channel. If you go to the bottom of my individual channel, there's a link to that channel as well. Any word on CE roles? Are they even hiring? They are. It's just very, very slow. So like for instance, I've had like a couple CE clients, interview clients over the last couple of weeks. So they're hiring, but it's really, really slow. It's probably at, a fifth, a tenth of what it was even maybe a year ago. Thanks again. Keep up the great work. Awesome. Keep us posted. My recruiter pretty much ghosted me. I finished my interviews last year and then they went on a hiring freeze. Your recruiter also may no longer be there. So that's something you can try and establish too. If they're no longer there, hopefully it has a forwarding person where you can reach out to somebody. I hope that they set up those systems. I don't think that that's 100% in place, but it's something to check. Hey, Jeff, you might remember me from last week. Absolutely. You were doing linked YouTube comments and some good engagement last week. Absolutely. I progressed to the next round after my successful GNL interview. Your channel certainly helped. Awesome. Awesome. Congrats. Keep going. Keep practicing. Keep pushing yourself. It's worth it. The time spent will be worth it. I promise. And good luck. You're welcome. Do you think it's going to get even worse later this year? Yeah, I do. But again, I'm a pretty positive person. I like to have a really positive mindset. But yeah, I think we're headed deeper into a recession. These big tech companies have had a little bit of success with their equity, with their stock. So I have seen a little bit of an uptick in hiring, but I am worried about some of the recessionary items. And again, a lot of these big tech companies are, based in the US or headquartered in the US. And we have a lot of challenges with our debt ceiling, with our banking system. So it's going to be challenging, but I think it might slow down a little bit, but it's been decent for the last couple months. Decent. Hey Jeff, are there any other good career choices for a technical recruiter? Yeah, I love some sort of project or program management. Like you actually do quite a bit of like shuffling and managing. So I think that that's a good role. And or if you have a passion for HR, I think the human resources component is less likely to get filtered out because of that human touch, empathy, etc. So those are two recommended paths, but it would really default to kind of like passion, purpose. Those items would be really important to be thinking about. Like I wouldn't be a great program manager and I never had interest in HR. So those were two kind of the paths that I saw I could break away from when I wanted to stop doing recruiting. But neither was the ideal path for me personally. I hope that helps. Okay, again, we're out of questions. Let's sit tight. We've had really good engagement today, so I kind of want to stick with it for a little bit longer, just in case some additional questions come in. Let's dive back to, do you want to still work in big tech? Again, let's go back to really early on in the conversation. What is the value of a brand? What is the value of learning? What's the value of just getting that big comp coming in? They're all good, but if you are going to leave your current company for big tech, just understand you are taking on risk. They could potentially lay you off and they're not going to feel bad about it. So it's just knowing the risk going into that company. But in these current economic times, any job move is going to come with a little bit of risk. So as you're thinking about moving jobs, think about the stability of your current role. Do you like management? Do you like the overall culture? And then if you were to take a new job and were impacted by a potential layoff, how long could you survive, even including severance, unemployment, just really, really financially plan. Any opinions on the expected Meta layoff? I, I can't keep up. I just can't keep up. The layoffs are just, they're just, they're nonstop. I didn't even know Meta was doing another layoff tomorrow. Honestly, I'm just not even keeping a pulse on it. It's just, there's so many layoffs. They're happening all the time. There's little groups that are getting laid off here or there within different departments. And so I just think we're going to see more of this. And as the stock prices go up, they're going to try and get leaner and leaner. So no, I don't really have an opinion. I feel bad for the people who are getting impacted. Welcome. I have a project interview where I'm given a software development project assignment for 5 days. And at the end, I interview about the project, unsure about the question type. Any advice? Yeah, I mean, so on that software development project assignment, I would just say put in massive time and effort. People aren't going to like that. Like, should you be spending a ton of this extra time on your own to like do this stuff? Not really, but I would just say don't leave any stone unturned. Just put in massive, massive time and effort, even if that means you need to take time off of your current job. Like, it's worth it. It'll be worth it for the experiment, the experience, but also ultimately, if it helps you get the job, that's going to be the biggest value, of course. Okay. If no additional questions come in the next minute or so, I think we've hit a good natural stopping point. Of course, I want to hang out as long as possible, make sure I'm driving value. So let's sit on it for just another minute or so. And then if no additional questions come in, we can wrap up. Thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate it. Again, go to practiceinterviews.com to check out our free resources. I've hit over 330 videos on my YouTube channel. If you like what I did today, smash that like button. If you've never subscribed, new original content every other Monday, and I go live 10 a.m. Pacific time every single Tuesday. What else do I have? Interview mastery course. If you use the coupon code May, $200 off just today till 11:59 Pacific time. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to answer this last question and jump off. I have a safe and stable paying job now, but it's been 5 years and my project got pretty boring. Any advice on switching this year? Yeah, I always recommend switching, but just know that switching will come with a little bit of risk. But what's the bigger risk? We want to reflect back. The older version of ourselves, will we be mad if we didn't try and switch and we were kind of bored? Probably. So I think it's worth the risk, but just be looking at the finances and make sure that you're making a really, really good decision. Thank you, everybody, again for being here. Have a great day. I will be back next Tuesday. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks.